The day my own son raised a champagne glass and called me the biggest failure in this room. The entire wedding ballroom burst into awkward laughter. I smiled anyway. Not because it didn't hurt. Because I already knew something no one else at that reception knew, and within the next hour, the people sitting at the groom's family's table would discover exactly who I was. Before I tell you what happened next, subscribe to channel name, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every comment. My name is Daniel Mercer, and for most of my life, I learned that people judge you by what they can see. They saw a 62-year-old man wearing a plain gray suit that had been tailored more than once. They saw hands rough from years of work. They saw an old pickup truck parked outside the country club. They assumed they knew my entire story. My son, Ethan, believed it more than anyone. When Ethan was little, his mother passed away after a long illness. Overnight, I became both parents. I worked construction during the day and cleaned office buildings at night. Sometimes I'd sleep 3 hours before getting up to do it all over again. Every dollar I earned went toward his future. When he wanted to play baseball, I sold my motorcycle. When he wanted college, I refinanced the only house I'd ever owned. I never complained because watching him succeed felt like winning myself. But success has a strange way of introducing people to the wrong crowd. After college, Ethan started dating Vanessa. She came from money. Her parents owned luxury hotels across the East Coast. Every conversation somehow turned into reminding people how successful they were. The first time I met Vanessa's father, Richard Holloway, he looked at my calloused hands and asked, "Still working with tools at your age?" I smiled. "They've served me well." He laughed like I'd told a joke. Ethan laughed too. That hurt more than Richard ever could. Over the next 2 years, Ethan slowly stopped calling. Birthdays became text messages. Christmas became excuses. Whenever I offered help, he politely explained that Vanessa's family had already taken care of everything. I told myself that's what growing up looked like. I was wrong. The wedding invitation arrived only 3 weeks before the ceremony. No handwritten note. No phone call. Just a printed card. I almost didn't go. But a father only gets one chance to watch his son get married. The ballroom looked like something from a movie. Crystal chandeliers. White roses everywhere. A string quartet played while waiters carried trays of champagne. I quietly found my assigned seat. The last table. Near the kitchen doors. I wasn't surprised. Then I noticed something interesting. My place card had my last name spelled incorrectly. Not once. Twice. Someone had deliberately changed it. When I politely mentioned it to the wedding coordinator, she whispered, "I was told it didn't really matter." I thanked her. Then I returned to my seat. I watched people shake Richard's hand like he owned the world. Nobody recognized me. Exactly the way I preferred it. Dinner ended. The speeches began. Vanessa cried. Richard praised wealth, legacy, and building successful families. Then Ethan stood. He raised his glass. "I want to thank everyone who believed in me." He looked directly at Richard. "You showed me what real success looks like." Everyone applauded. Then he turned toward me. "And thanks to my dad." He paused just long enough. "For teaching me what happens when you settle for less." The room became quiet. "I love you, Dad, but I promised myself I'd never end up living paycheck to paycheck like you." Scattered laughter echoed across the ballroom. Someone actually clapped. Richard smiled proudly. Vanessa looked relieved. I simply nodded. Ethan thought he had embarrassed me. He had no idea he just embarrassed himself. You see, for the past 12 years, I hadn't worked construction because I needed money. I'd worked because I loved building things. What almost nobody knew was that 20 years earlier, I had quietly sold a software company I started in my garage. After taxes and investments, the proceeds had grown beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I never chased luxury. I never wanted headlines. I built a private charitable foundation instead. It had funded hospitals, trade schools, scholarships, and housing projects in dozens of communities. Every donation had been anonymous. Not because I wanted praise. Because helping people shouldn't require applause. Very few people even knew I was the founder. One of those people happened to be sitting across the room. Judge Helen Brooks. She had arrived as Richard's business guest. The moment our eyes met, her expression changed. She stood, walked across the ballroom, and hugged me. The entire room fell silent. Richard looked confused. Judge Brooks smiled. "Daniel, I had no idea Ethan was your son." Ethan blinked. "You know my father?" She laughed softly. "Know him?" She turned toward the room. "The Children's Cancer Center in this county exists because of this man." The room became perfectly still. Richard's smile disappeared. Judge Brooks continued. "The Veterans Housing Project downtown? Daniel funded it. The scholarship that sent hundreds of first-generation students to college? Daniel." People started whispering. Vanessa stared at Ethan. Ethan stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Richard quickly interrupted. "Well, generosity is admirable." Judge Brooks looked at him. "You've accepted awards for community leadership." She smiled politely. "I always wondered why Mr. Mercer declined every ceremony where your company took credit for projects he privately financed." Now the whispers became louder. Richard's face lost color. I hadn't expected Judge Brooks to say that. But she wasn't finished. "I assumed everyone here already knew." Nobody did. Richard forced another smile. "I think there's been some misunderstanding." "There hasn't." A familiar voice answered from behind him. The speaker was Laura Chin, an investigative journalist. She walked toward our table holding a folder. Richard's eyes widened. Laura looked at me first. "I'm sorry, Daniel. I know you hate attention." Then she faced Richard. "My newspaper has spent 8 months investigating your charitable foundation." The ballroom went silent again. She placed several documents onto the table. "Our investigation found your company claimed tax credits for donations that never came from your organization." She pointed calmly. "They came from anonymous trusts." She looked at me. "Trusts controlled by Daniel Mercer." Gasps spread through the room. Richard reached for the papers. Laura pulled them back. "They've already been submitted to federal investigators," Vanessa whispered. "Dad, tell me she's lying." He couldn't. Because every document carried his own signature. The truth was devastating. For years Richard had quietly taken public credit for charitable work financed by anonymous donors, never expecting one of those donors to attend his daughter's wedding. Ethan slowly walked toward me. His eyes were filled with tears. You did all of that?" I nodded. "I never wanted you to measure people by money." He couldn't even look at me. "I know what you thought." He swallowed hard. "I thought you failed." "No." I smiled gently. "I just stopped trying to impress people." Federal investigators arrived less than a month later. Richard resigned from every board he served on. Several financial crimes led to civil penalties, permanent removal from multiple nonprofit organizations, and years of legal battles. His reputation never recovered. Vanessa eventually apologized for believing everything she'd been told. To her credit, she began volunteering at one of the trade schools my foundation supported. The biggest surprise came from Ethan. He showed up at my front porch one rainy Saturday carrying nothing but a toolbox. "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me." I looked at the toolbox. "What's that for?" He smiled through tears. "I figured, maybe we could build something together." For the first time in years I hugged my son. Not because he'd discovered I was wealthy. Because he'd finally understood what real wealth looked like. These days we spend weekends restoring old houses for families who need a fresh start. Nobody there knows my bank account. Nobody cares. They only remember the man willing to pick up a hammer beside them. Looking back, I realize revenge doesn't always mean destroying someone's life. Sometimes the strongest revenge is allowing the truth to walk into the room while you remain completely silent. People reveal themselves eventually. You just have to be patient enough to let them. If this story taught me anything, it's that character is invisible until life gives it a reason to speak. Never measure a person's worth by their clothes, their job, or the car they drive. The quietest person in the room may be carrying a lifetime of sacrifice, wisdom, and integrity that no amount of money can buy. If this story meant something to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And remember, never underestimate the quiet person in the room.